Welcome to the Red Bull Theater Podcast, where guests discuss all things classical theater with your host, Nathan Winkelstein.
This evening's conversation will focus on Shakespeare's more confounding play, Pericles, and specifically on the narrative character of Gower. We will be focusing on Gower's speech at the top of Act 3, for those of you who wish to follow along. Our guest tonight has appeared on stages all across the country and the Off-Broadway rialto. He has built a sterling reputation as a brilliant actor in the classics and has tackled the role of Gower in Red Bull Theater's 2003 production, the founding production of the company, as well as the 2016 production at Theater for a New Audience under the direction of Trevor Nunn. In addition to Pericles, he has also appeared in Edward II, Witch of Edmonton, and Volpone at Red Bull, tying him for the most Red Bull productions by any one actor. He is, of course, the great Raphael Nash Thompson. Hi, Raphael.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
Well, I know that you are in the midst of a rehearsal process. Thank the Lord to be back in rehearsal processes for live theater. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. And it's nice to be back with Red Bull. Nice to be back with a play that I really appreciate and admire for a lot of things. And to be able to share some play with those who might not be as familiar with it.
I was going to say, I'm very glad that you appreciate and admire lots of things about this play, because I'm truly fascinated to know what. Okay. So we will talk about that in a mere moment, but first of all, so people have a sense of where we are starting off, you're going to give us a read of Gower's speech at the top of Act 3. This is also the top of where many people consider Shakespeare started getting involved in the play. And this is for a little context of where we're at so far in the story. Gower is our narrator. He is a long dead poet who has come back to narrate the story of Pericles for the audience. He appears throughout the play to fill in transitions and jump us from adventure to adventure. And by this time in the main narrative, Prince Pericles has already been driven from his kingdom due to knowing about an incestuous relationship. He has been shipwrecked on an island. He has wooed a princess, and he has married her. And now he is in the kingdom of his wife, and he awaits word from his kingdom on when he might be able to return. And so, Raphael, whenever you are ready.
All right. Now sleepy slackèd hath the rouse, no din but snores about the house, made louder by the o'erfed breast of this most pompous marriage feast. The cat, with eyes of burning coal, now couches form the mouse's hole, and crickets at the oven's mouth sing the blither for their drouth. Hymen hath brought the bride to bed, where by the loss of maidenhead a babe is molded. Be attent, and time that is so briefly spent with your fine fancies quaintly each. What's dumb in show, I'll plain with speech. By many a dern and painful perch of Pericles, the careful search around the world the lords inquire and fanned their quest. At last from Tyre to the court of King Simonides are letters brought, the tenor these. Antiochus and his daughter dead. The men of Tyrus on the head of Helicanus would set on the crown of Tyre, but he will none. To suppress these mutinies, says to 'em, if King Pericles come not home in twice 6 moons, he, obedient to their dooms, will take the crown. The sum of this, brought hither to Pentapolis, Ye ravishèd the regions round, and everyone with claps can sound. Our heir apparent is a king. Who dreamt? Who thought of such a thing? Brief, he must hence depart to Tyre. His queen, with child, makes her desire, which who shall cross, along to go. Omit we all their dole and woe. Like Corridor, her nurse she takes, and so to sea. Their vessel shakes on Neptune's billow. Half the flood hath their keel cut, but fortune moved. There is again the grizzled north, disgorges such a tempest forth, that as a duck for life that dives, so up and down the poor ship drives. The lady shrieks, and well anear does fall in travail with her fear. Now what ensues in this fell storm shall for itself perform. I nil relate. Action may conveniently the rest convey, which might not what by me is told. In your imagination hold this stage, the ship upon whose deck the sea-tossed Pericles appears to speak.
Thank you, Raphael.
Thank you.
Thank you. My goodness. Okay, I almost feel like the initial questions that I had prepped they almost feel for naught after that because of how extraordinary that is. So I do have to ask you, as probably much of our audience knows, actors in general, when we are given a role, are thinking a lot about relationships, are thinking about why we say, what we want, what we do. That strikes me as particularly tricky for a role like Gower, because Gower only interacts with the audience, and he is a dead poet. For those of you who don't know this, he is a poet. He was a contemporary of Chaucer, who wrote a poem called Confessions Amantes, The Lover's Confession, in which were many of the stories of Pericles. And so he has been brought back, not randomly, to narrate this story by Shakespeare. But for you as an actor, how do you find the motivation for this character of Gower when you look at the text?
Well, I try to keep it as simple as possible. And Gower is an historical figure. I think in the 1300s he lived back, as you were saying, in Chaucer's time, and known for he's almost as famous as Chaucer in his day. And he would get paid to write poetry or just any kind of language that needed to be written for any kind of special occasion, whether it's in the court or wherever. He would get paid for this. And so he's a storyteller. And I just look at it as a storyteller telling the story and hoping that no one misses any event in the story, to lay it out as clearly and dramatically as you can to engage the audience and knowing what's happening, because Gower's task really he's like a chorus on some level, and a storyteller and narrator, a guide, if you will. And he just kind of sets the stage. So every time I appear, it's usually the beginning of each act. So at least 5 times he's coming out to set the scene. And that is kind of what I like to do, remind people what happened or where we are, and then where we're going and what to expect. And so that's kind of the mode I get into. I just like to connect with people and tell the story. And when I'm performing Gower, I engage the audience. And that's what I like about it. I can break that fourth wall and just look at everybody in the audience and talk to them. And even if I'm on stage sometimes and the other actors are doing the scene, I still feel like I have a license to look around at the audience and make sure everybody's engaged. And that's my role, to kind of facilitate the bringing the audience into the action of the story and making sure everybody knows where we're going on the journey. So that's kind of how I approached doing the role.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's actually sort of lovely that like Gower made his money as a storyteller, and now he's coming back. This is one of his stories. He's coming back to life to make sure it gets told right. I thought that was very clear in your reading right then. Is like, my goal is that you understand and that you recognize how like entertaining and like dramatic this is, and so follow the story. So then let me just pull the string a little bit further and go, why this story? And I realize this may or may not be a question for Gower. This may be a question for Raphael, but like, what is Gower hoping that the audience gets out of watching this tale? Is it just entertainment, or do you think Gower's trying to drive a message home, or what?
Well, there's a speech that Gower has right at the start of the evening where he introduces himself, and he tells people, I've come back from the ashes to sing a song, this old song, and people have used it to restore themselves, to make themselves healthy and whole. And if you buy it, the line is, its purchase is to make men glorious. So if you buy this song, this story, and listen to it and follow it, it should show you how to be glorious. It should give you that example of how to be moral and upright and glorious and all that entails. So that's really the purpose, I think, of Gower. He's telling his story for the benefit of man, and each person that hears it hopefully will be changed for the better into the state of glorious.
And is this something that, so I find it very interesting that you've done the role twice and so far apart. Is this something that you find varied in the two productions? Because of course, as the narrator, you also have to set the tone, I would imagine, for an individual director's vision of the play. So did you find that the two Gowers were distinctly different, or did you find that they were really quite similar in their messaging and how they went about doing what they did?
From my perspective, since I am the actor that did both parts in both different productions, my feeling was that it was the same character, just in different clothing, because the story remained the same, the language remained the same. And I think my purpose is still the same, to make sure everyone understands what's happening in this story and to feel some sort of connection with it, to be engaged. And now when I was working with Trevor Nunn on it just a few years ago, it was a musical. So we had music written for it, and lots of musicians. Oh my goodness, it was just a wonderful production. And the one that I did with Jesse and Red Bull was not as elaborate, but just as compelling, because it was a little more intimate, and we created things almost like from thin air, musical instruments. We turned something over, and once it was a bucket, but then now it's a drum, things like that. We were very inventive. And but the story still remained the same, and the main character still had to go through everything that he went through, and in both productions. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Well, I feel like given that you have brought it up, it does seem to me that maybe there is, of course, one person that I can call on here who may know a little bit of something about that very first production. So we do have our guest straight off the presses from first rehearsal of our first live production post-COVID onset, the artistic director of Red Bull Theater and director of that initial production of Pericles, Jesse Berger. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, hello, Nathan. Hello, Raphael. It's good to see you both.
Thank
Nathan, I saw you all day. But Raphael, it's great to
Sure.
see you and to listen to you talking about Gower and remembering the time we had together rehearsing our production of Pericles.
Thank you.
So the first thing I want to ask, Jesse, and the reason I wanted to bring you on right now was actually this last thing that Raphael said about the particular nature of the production that the two of you did together, which was this sort of well, what's the way to put it? Very, very theatrical and created production. A bucket becomes a drum, becomes a whatever. Do you think, and now I can imagine if it was your first show in New York, that some of that was a fiscal necessity. But I also, how did that to you play towards this play specifically as a way of approaching it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think it was about money. It was actually about my feeling about the play, and this was 2003. So my recollection is that there were a lot of things that were very meaningful to me in Pericles, and one of them was about how the act of imagination and storytelling, as Gower says in that first speech, is restorative in and of itself, is a healing power that we have as human beings to create and tell stories to help us learn how to live in the world. And so the idea that the company of actors would create everything from what seemed to be nothing. There were 16 actors, I think, in that production, and it was a bare stage. There were a lot of things, curtains and things that we could pick up and transform, but the idea was that all of it would be a vista in front of the audience's eyes, that we would create magic seemingly out of thin air, as Raphael said. And so that became the guiding principle of the design of the production, based on the idea that storytelling itself was central to how Pericles worked as a play, and that each world would have a different style to it, but a different style of storytelling, not so much that we're going to be suddenly all wearing a different kind of costume, more that we use puppets in one scene, we use masks in one scene, we use, so it was about, I was searching for, now I'm remembering better, I was searching for how many different modes of storytelling can we use to tell the story. So it began, if I remember right, it began with Gower, Raphael walking right down stage, and all the company just coming out as actors, looking out at the audience, and Raphael had a big book. And I think maybe you had the gong first. You rang a gong, if you remember, Raphael, a gong, and then there was a kind of hum from the company, and Raphael opened up that big book, and we began with that kind of elemental story. So the book, he had that book all through the production, and I remember I can vividly remember Raphael closing the book at intermission. This was in Act 2 when he was describing, I think Gower's describing here, the passage of time of 16 years. And those are puppets, beautifully made puppets that were handcrafted by Emily DeCola and her team, and they were modeled on the actors playing Dionysa, Marina. Is that Marina? I think that's like Corrida holding Marina, and Alvaro Mendoza, who played, I can't remember all the characters' name. I think in that picture he's the Leonine.
So then, sorry, just as clarity for the audience, this is Jesse's talking about the Act 2 of the production, which came, I think, early in Act 3 of the production, Act 3 of the script. Which is after the reading you just heard from.
Actually, now that I'm looking at it, this is the scene in which I think, if I remember right, this is where Marina's holding the nurse Lycorida, who has died.
Yes, because that happens in the next. That's correct. Yeah. Cool. Raphael.
Yeah.
In this production, I'm going to lean on this production more because, first of all, I saw the Trevor Nunn one, so I don't have as many questions about it. And second of all, it's the Red Bull production, so I'm sure it was superior because Jesse directed it, and I'm paid by him. So,
well, you can be honest about whatever you thought.
I was in diapers. So that's not quite true. So, Raphael, in this production, and I've actually just been, because we are drop here, we're doing a reading of Pericles on October 25th. That is off an edited version of the same edited adaptation that Jesse did. And so I have been inside that script quite a lot recently, and I saw that you, Raphael, went beyond Gower's normal role in the production and handled a number of the I've been hesitating to use this analogy because I may be the only one in the audience, but I can't help how much Gower is like the dungeon master of this D&D play, of this D&D adventure that is Pericles. And like the dungeon master, you do the narrations when people move from chapter to chapter, and you also play the NPCs, the non-perform, basically the people that you don't want anyone else to play. And it was interesting to see in this that it seems like you played a number of those NPCs, a number of the people who get it going. How did that add to the experience of playing this storyteller poet of Gower?
Well, from what I remember of that production, we were all such an ensemble where we were all working together, sometimes just to achieve certain moments in the scene. So we would all try to contribute to the process. So I would narrate, but then I would say something like Pericles, he's just survived the shipwreck and here he comes to speak. And then I'd pick up a bucket of water and just throw it in his face.
That was a great moment.
Start speaking, things like that, which kind of eggs the story on. And so it was nice to be able to participate in some of in Tarsus where there's famine, and just to walk through all the people who are dying of starvation and on the floor of our set as set the scene. And as I talk about it, things like that, it was a nice give and take.
I remember in that particular scene, I think if I'm right, you drew a curtain slowly across the stage as you delivered that speech about the starving Tarsians, and that was a simple gesture, and it set the scene. There's one character you played, you probably don't remember, Raphael, you will now. You played Ceremon at the beginning of our Act 2, and that was a very deliberate choice on my part. Ceremon's the healer.
Right.
And so it was made perfect sense to me that Gower, especially in the idea of storytelling as healing, and that Gower should play that role.
Well, I mean, Pericles is such a fun story. I mean, it's just got some of everything. I don't know if I've talked to you about this, Jesse, but if I did it and there was a shipwreck, I would have in the sea, floating along the sea, a kitchen sink. Because is that everything is in this show, even the kitchen sink. So at many shipwrecks, you'll see a kitchen sink floating away. I love it. Just my homage to that. Everything's in this show because it's got what? Two kings, lords, knights, governors, fishermen, mystics. I mean, just everything.
Bods and panders.
Yes, prostitution, murderers,
pirates.
I mean, even a goddess coming down from heavens. It's all in this piece. So that's why it was such fun that we all, as actors, as an ensemble, got to create so many diverse worlds and places. Yes.
So let me, I'm actually loving this because Jesse knows this, and I think I hinted it to Raphael as well, that I am a Pericles skeptic. I think that there are some individual scenes in this play that are truly extraordinary, and I see ways to solve some of the scenes that are less than extraordinary, but I sometimes struggle to come up with why I would bother. So, and I do think that if you look at the history of Pericles, both in England and in the United States, other than certain moments of extreme popularity, it has gone through long fallow periods of performance. And so I guess I'm already getting more interested in the play, just hearing the two of you talk so enthusiastically about it. But Jesse, can you speak to Raphael's point? Raphael talked about the why of the play, and it's to bring I don't want to misquote it. It's
glorious.
To make men glorious. Yeah.
And is that, Jesse, do you agree with that? Is that what you see as the why?
I love that Raphael picked that out. I hadn't remembered that line because for me, I was stuck on, and even in my head as I tried to remember 20 years later, what was it? I was stuck on the previous stuff about it hath been used as restoratives, and the idea of the hero journey, and the idea of Pericles' search for self being the key for me in the way that storytelling and the active imagination helps that character, and by extension the audience going on the journey with him, find where he belongs in the world and heal his journey. But he's an emblem for everybody. The idea of make men glorious is really beautiful, and men in the largest sense of the word, and glorious in the largest sense of embrace the totality of the beauty of our humanity. And you can only do that. You can only do that if you go out and you lose some things, and you have some trials and tribulations. And that's, I think, one of the points of Pericles, the journey, is that he loses everything, and he withdraws completely into himself. And it's only through the magic or the deep bond between him and his daughter that he begins to return to himself, and the goddess Diana. I mean, it's so beautiful, but it requires like in The Winter's Tale, it is required you to awake your faith, Nathan. Which I think is the line that Paulina says to Leontes at the end. It is required you to awake your faith, and Pericles has that in common. If you enter Pericles as a skeptic, then you will only meet it. You will never meet it halfway. It needs your buy-in of the romance and the mythos of it, the myth of it, because it traffics in folktale, fairy tale, mythology, and I'm not being that articulate about it, but I was reading a lot of Joseph Campbell and thinking about him in context of this play when we did it, and thinking about the hero journey, and thinking about the allegory of it, and even I was saying to you earlier today, Nathan, even King Lear, which is really a fairy tale at the beginning, an old man with 3 daughters. Pericles is broader than that. Has more in common with Winter's Tale and Cymbeline and the late romances, where in almost all of those plays, a daughter heals a father.
So which is interesting for, different conversation, interesting for Shakespeare's life. But the Raphael, I think Jesse has defined his version of this, but I'm curious about can you define what Shakespeare's or your definition of glorious is for this play? The make men glorious meaning, because there's this definition of glorious that is you become the top of the mountain A-lister, but I don't think we're speaking about that. So when you as Gower are speaking about glory, what are you talking about? What are you actually trying to say there?
I'm thinking men just have to fulfill what is good in them, and allow that to survive and persevere no matter their circumstances. And I think that's what this show is. It's a play about a man, Pericles, who is good and virtuous, and he gets all kinds of things thrown at him by fate. And he's spun in many different directions, and the places he goes all around basically the Mediterranean, which was basically the known world then. So he's just going back and forth to Mytilene and Ephesus and Antioch and Tyre, Tarsus, Pentapolis, all these different places, and encountering all kinds of people, from very good people to very bad people, and different situations. And through it all, he stays true to himself, and he doesn't let it destroy him. And I think that's the point. And that's an example for us that you can be glorious by staying true to the goodness that is in you, and not letting all the different situations change you. Because each step of the way, Pericles encounters whatever he encounters, and somehow, because he's Pericles, he deals with it in a way that keeps him virtuous and keeps him strong.
I would just add, can I add one word to
please,
glorious?
Please.
Because I think there's a sense of transcendence. And I think that's why at the moment that he begins to recover himself, the goddess Diana is invoked. And then once he begins to recover himself through Marina, who is an incredibly significant character in her own right in the second half of the play, through Marina, then he is able to begin to regain his wife and his family and his friends and his colleagues and his kingdom. But I think there is something transcendent in that word glorious that's beyond, just, well, like the sun is shining.
Right. So then you just brought her up. I was going to bring up this point, is that, I mean, the somewhat obvious pushback, at least on first read of the play, is that Pericles collapses in on himself for Pericles actually does reach the end of his rope. He survives a lot, but he reaches the end of his rope and does need. So I get, like, Marina seems to fulfill what you're saying about kind of a self-driven glory. Marina doesn't fall under, frankly, circumstances that just become more and more horrifying. As like, it's a truly, I recognize that it's somewhat written as comedic, some of those broad pander scenes, but what's going on is horrifying. And she surpasses, and actually, as you mentioned earlier, Jesse, really saves Pericles. So I guess I would just is the question, is there an argument there that it's not also a solo journey, that it is a journey towards glory is not the journey of a single man, but of mankind, of man and their fellow man or family? Is that the pushback? Did I answer my own question?
I think you may have answered your own question in your own way. I like that idea, Nathan, and I don't know that I have a direct answer to it. I mean, Marina definitely holds the key to bringing Pericles back from the brink, and he's really become a hermit. And she's obviously got something in her that is ineffably magical and powerful, that comes from the love of, I mean, it's real, it's human, it's not just magical, it's really human magic. It comes from the love of Thaisa and Pericles, which was born also when Pericles was at a low moment, and they have this magical moment where he achieves her love, and they fall in love, and when he loses her tragically at sea, he loses his wife and his unborn daughter. I can understand retreating. And it takes the embodiment of their love, Marina, to bring him back from the brink.
And so, yeah, and I mean, he even semi-survives that one, right? Like, he grows his beard and hair out, but it's not until Dionysa pulls one on him that he truly collapses.
Thank you. Yeah. Exactly. When she's gone. That's right.
For those other nerds out there, I do, of course, find it interesting and think it's probably a different conversation that we're talking about a man who lost a son and wrote a whole play about it potentially, and is now writing about how the loss of a child can cause a father to crack, and he goes to that quite a lot.
And he has two daughters, right, left. Shakespeare had two daughters, right, left, and so who knows? We don't know. He doesn't write a biography, or an autobiography, but he certainly, in his late plays, those young women are very important.
And so, Raphael, were you in either production, because I actually don't remember in the Trevor Nunn one, were you allowed as Gower to watch any of the scenes?
Watch, yes. Sometimes I would. There were the way it was staged. I didn't necessarily set the scene up and then leave. I would watch some. I would move around. I'd then leave sometimes after. But yes, I was able to watch, like I said, watch the audience as well, and just see how people are responding to the story. And as an actor, I enjoyed that freedom because I could see what was on the faces of the audience and kind of get the energy from them a lot of the times. What they were feeling, what they found interesting or funny, I'd pick up on it, so that was nice to have that dynamic going back and forth. So as a narrator, I've done that and was able to stick around sometimes for some of the.
And you are a wonderful storyteller, if I just might add. I mean, Raphael, if it isn't obvious, audience, from even the speech that Raphael began the evening with, I mean, Raphael's a wonderful storyteller, and we were so lucky and fortunate that I felt fortunate that I had met you, Raphael, and asked you to play Gower because it just seemed perfect, and you were in fact the first actor ever hired to work at Red Bull Theater. I was lucky when you said yes. I said, great, I can build this production now. I have the heart and soul of it in this wonderful actor and person and storyteller named Raphael Nash Thompson.
Well, thank you. I must say I was not familiar with the play when you offered it to me. So then I read it. And I thought, oh, okay, I like some of the speeches this gentleman has to say. There are other places in the play where the dialogue and the setup is not quite as clear. And so those kind of can cause problems here and there. But for the most part, I thought, wow, this is just something I can have fun with, telling this story. And then to base it on an historical figure that Gower was, just made it even more interesting for me. So thank you.
There are so many beautiful comments coming in. Most of them aren't question form, but I may end up reading a few of them just because they're really lovely. But there is one question coming off the Dungeon Master comment, so somebody else knows what the heck I'm talking about, which was, how much fun was it to play a character seemingly in control of time and space? That's very much Dungeon Master, right? Controls everything. So I guess my question would be for you as Gower is, did you feel that way? Did you feel like you controlled the narrative or were simply narrating something that was uncontrollable? And did you find more interest in Gower, as you said before, experiencing how the audience experiences the play, or simply in how Gower experiences the story?
Well, the first part of your question, when I was playing the role, what I really felt was that I could just have to tell the story. And I didn't feel like I was manipulating anything. I know I've played in The Tempest. I've done the role of Prospero. Now, that role, which is also one of Shakespeare's later plays and similar in tone, in some aspects to Pericles, a lot of things in one is in the other. But in that piece as Prospero, yes, you do control the action, and you're the puppet master, as they say. But in Pericles, I was happy just to kind of be on the side of the audience, and I'm gonna tell you this story. And I felt like I was there for the audience more so than anything else, and to make sure they were well taken care of, and that the story was well taken care of. And then the other actors just were in control of everything else. So from that aspect, it wasn't like I was a puppet master in Pericles like I was in The Tempest.
Can I ask a follow-up for you, Raphael, on regarding the production you did with me? Because I remember you had an emotional journey as that character that I could then, and I don't know if you could speak to that after so many years. Was it the emotional journey that you took with the audience, that you were tracking, or is this maybe it's the same question? I always imagined that there was a relationship for you, the storyteller, not literal relationship, but relationship with you to Pericles and his journey. And maybe that's the same, maybe that's two sides of the same question. But I felt that you had an emotional journey as the actor playing that role.
I did. And the journey comes from the story itself, at least to me. And the way we did it at the end, when we had the glorious singer,
Angela I, wonderful actor, singer.
It broke my heart when she comes on as the goddess to kind of settle things and kind of put things correctly. And it just brought tears to my eyes sometimes. And in fact, a story, this was 2003. There were a couple of young guys from my community, teenagers, that were brought, some friends of mine brought. And these two guys, they might have been 8th or 9th grade or something, but they came to Pericles. And I don't know if this was their first Shakespeare, but this is what I was told at the end of the show, after Angela, all of that Pericles found, reunited.
A lot of tears of joy, yeah.
But the lights came up and one of the guys was crying. And the other one hit him and said, "Oh, you were crying." He said, "I am not." And he's still, and he says, "You were crying," you know. So it got to them. These are teenagers, and it still moved them. And it's that story that really is the thing I think that is powerful. Given all the language that might be a little convoluted in spots, the story still, and that's power. Yeah,
that's great. And you've reminded me of something. This is it's immodest of me to mention this because I directed the production, but I remember an audience member saying, I don't know if it was in performances. I remember hearing an audience member say at the end of one performance, and I used to watch it almost every night because it was my baby and the first play I directed in New York and major, you know, and I was so proud of it. And I watched almost every performance. And what somebody said, it's a miracle at the end after the bows. And that's to not just the experience of the production. It's really not immodest to me because it wasn't about the production. It's about the story and the gloriousness of it. And they were caught up in it. And if you can capture that with a play, even a broken text like Pericles, then that proves its worth 1,000 times over to me. Those young men and that woman who said it was a miracle to her.
I have to say it's actually you guys are turning me. I have to admit it. And this wasn't even this wasn't a straw man. I mean, Jesse knows that I was like working on this, being like,
Well, you're not alone, Nathan. People think this is not Hamlet. This is not one of the great Shakespeare plays, but it has greatness in it.
And I do think that there's something like what you were telling me. I'm actually finding it ironic because, as Jesse, as you know, I am sort of obsessed with the performer as storyteller doing roles rather than just performer as role of these sort of clowns that I call them clowns, even though they're not. But like the storyteller who does characters to tell a story rather than a distinct character. And it sounds, Raphael, like you were that, like you are, and it sounds like you actually, Jesse, you made a company of these people. You made a company where, yes, of course, they were Pericles, they were so-and-so, they were so-and-so, but what they really were a company of storytellers.
That's right.
Telling the story. And I actually think that there is something about that motif that works extremely powerfully with not just Pericles, but all of these heightened texts, because it's not naturalistic. It's not naturalistic, it's simply true. And so if you heighten it to the point where people don't go, hey, that riddle in Act 1 is too easy. If you heighten it to the point where you know that that's a fable, then people are more willing, as you said, to maybe walk in a cynic, but then learn how they're supposed to think about this story and see it in a different light.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And it's at least in our case of our production, it was elemental and even like the weaker part of the writing, which is most people agree is the first couple acts, like those first couple scenes in it's not Tarsus, where is it at the beginning? When Antioch, he with the incest. I mean, we literally had the actors wearing masks. So it had the sense of two-dimensionality that the writing has. And so I think where I've seen a lot of productions of this play, and I think that for my 2 cents, if you're trying to fix a play when you're doing it, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But if you believe in it, you might have to you might have to make some, to do some work on the text. That's we do that with everything we do. But if you believe in the heart and soul of it, then the play should sing. And the ones that I've seen that I thought, they're trying too hard to fix it.
Yeah. Well, I guess especially if it is a show about believing in the heart and soul of things, one should probably believe in the heart and soul of things. Did you find, so Raphael, I mean, I feel like I've buried the interesting part. Jesse mentioned that you did have an arc and that it was based on the story you were telling. How is it for Gower to tell the parts of the story that are devastating, knowing the end? Like, is there any sense of, I don't know, like, do you feel like you're jerking the audience around? Are you trying to help them? How does that feel as Gower to that?
Well, as I'm telling the story, I know where it's going. the story. So even if there are parts that are just difficult and harsh and devastating, they have to know that, and they have to feel that. Like I can give you a speech like Tarsus, where, and this is why a lot of people say, well, maybe Shakespeare didn't write the first half. I would make a case that maybe some of that is Shakespeare in the first half of Pericles, the first couple of acts or whatever, because there's a speech where he describes Tarsus, and it's famine, and people are starving, but Tarsus used to be glorious and used to be one of the grandest cities of the realm, and now fate has just flipped everything. And the irony of that can happen, and people need to know that you can be on the top of the mountain, and then the next day you wake up and you're in the bottom of the sea or something. I mean, it's just how fate can be. And if I can, I'll share this speech. And my feeling is that it's Shakespeare, because it's basically a sonnet. It's 13 lines. And I think the first 2 lines describe the situation in Tarsus and how people are starving. But then the next 10 lines talk about how glorious it used to be. And then the 13th line just shows how it's flipped. And then there's not a 14th line, but I like to think that maybe there's laughter at the end because of the irony. And maybe that could be the 14th line. But this is the introduction to Tarsus, and the governor Cleon, his wife Dionysa, and all the people there. This is how it's introduced in these 13 lines. This Tarsus then, Cleon the governor, his Dionysa and their people starve. A city on whom plenty held full hand, for riches strewed herself even in her streets, whose towers bore heads so high they kissed the clouds, and strangers ne'er beheld but wondered at, whose men and dames so jetted and adorned like one another's glass to trim them by. Their tables were stored full to glad the sight, and not so much to feed on as delight. All poverty was scorned, and pride so great, the name of help grew odious to repeat. But see what heaven can do by this their change. You know, and then you see the devastation.
That's right. That's great.
So you have to give that to the audience. Yeah.
So I think, first of all, I got to tell you, Raphael, I've now heard that speech a bunch of times, and every time that I heard it, I was like, other than yours with the Tufana production, I have basically gone, yeah, Starving Town. And so I do have to say that, like, it is actually interesting in that speech that there are some hints that Tarsus might go bad. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, there are some hints in that these people, they're super grateful when the prince of this small country shows up and gives them food, but it actually helps to justify what feels like a completely out of the blue evil twist by Dionysa, when, I'm sure we all know, but Dionysa tries to have Marina killed because Marina's more attractive than her daughter, and it all goes wrong, but then she lied. It's a whole thing. But that twist feels like it comes out of the blue, but actually, if you hear the narration provided the way you just provided it, with the message that he's giving in that speech, there's actually a whole bunch of, like, maybe these people aren't just pure good, lovely people. Maybe they just really needed food. That's very cool.
And that reminds me of, I thought about it the other day. It's like the way he's talking about the different the images that he uses to create that picture the images of Othello when he's in front of the Senate, telling his story about his travels history. It was my hint to speak. And he would tell of rough quarries, rocks, and hills whose heads touch heaven. It was my hint to speak. And that hills whose heads touch heaven, you know, whose towers with heads so high they kiss the clouds. I mean, there's a kinship there that I think it feels like Shakespeare had a hand in these parts of Pericles as well, to me.
And I do think, and Raphael, you are so strong in this regard, but it is interesting. It's something that I think comes up a lot when people talk about Shakespeare and his work and how you pursue it, is like this idea of the imagery and what do you do with the imagery and what is the imagery. And that basically the difference between good Shakespeare and bad Shakespeare is bad Shakespeare, people go, what the hell is this imagery? Let's get through it. Towers that hit the sky just means mountains. So just think mountain when you say those words and everything will be okay. And then there's the other, and then the good Shakespeare is the Shakespeare where he's goes, no, he means towers that hit the sky. Those are the right words to describe it. That's why he's coming up with it. And it is interesting that, like, sometimes Shakespeare's characters are just amazing communicators. They're amazing at communicating what it is they're trying to communicate, and they're working really hard to come up with the right way to do it. And it sounds interesting that, like, you lean fully into that with the Gower character of, like, no, I'm not using imagery because it's pretty. I'm using it because it is the right way to best communicate this story in the way that you understand it. And I think there's a very important, rather simple but hard to grasp lesson about the use of language and what you're describing in how you do Gower.
Yeah, I like the fact that I feel that Shakespeare gives you the right word you need for that moment in that situation, you know,
right.
And that's part of the joy of working in a Shakespearean production.
Well, we do have to wrap this up. We're getting quite close. I do want to just share a comment that Donna Robin Littman shared, because I think it's lovely, and it was about Marina when we were talking about that. The comment, which may pop up in just a second, is Marina is buoyant. She was born buoyant. I always feel like I am on a sea voyage when I see/read Pericles with all its glories and challenges. The waves keep everything moving. And of course, the idea of buoyancy, for those of you who maybe don't know the show as well, is Marina, hence her name, was quite literally born buoyant. She was born on the water of a shipwreck storm in the scene right after the speech that Raphael read at the top of this. And then, of course, she remains buoyant in hope and in Raphael, as you put it, glory throughout the rest of the show. I just thought that was a lovely comment.
It is a lovely.
Yes. I would think it's like the roller coaster of Pericles. Yeah, I like the, you know, up and down on the waves. Yes.
Yeah, and the other word we haven't used tonight is what a lot of scholars call these late plays, romances. And this one is a classic romance.
Yeah, he must have been, I know, this was a new form then. You know, these plays that had tragedy and comedy and romance and adventure and love and magic and spirituality and mysticism. I mean, just like some of everything, just kind of just woven together to create a story. People coming back from the dead, you know, the things like the magic of these later Shakespeare plays. And I think it laid the foundation for, at least in my thinking, for a lot of these superhero blockbusters. You travel all, you know, Romancing the Stone, or, you know, whatever, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you have all this adventure, but there's comedy and there's tragedy, there's love, and there's just everything kind of, you know, this was Shakespeare's going in that direction.
Well, yes, and it looks back to the Odyssey.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
So.
And I do think that, as is, I think, brought up simply by Gower and by the use of an old poet as the person to tell an even older story, because the Pericles story is even older than Gower. Gower was just writing it. is that these stories are always prescient. And just the kind of constant reminder for us today that the Pericles story wasn't new then. It's just that human nature is human nature, and these plays matter. And they matter today as they mattered 400 years ago, as they mattered in Gower's time, as they mattered in Roman times from the original. And that's a nice thing to always be reminded about these plays.
Well, they're about human beings and the human condition, right? This play, I think. Well, I know you're wrapping up, Nathan. I think this play, if I'm remembering the scholarship right, this play was one of the most popular ones of its period. And Ben Jonson famously called it, I think, a moldy tale. Yep. He was a skeptic, but Ben Jonson is a skeptic, and Shakespeare perhaps was a humanist. And this play definitely feels to me like a humanist play, and I bring up Ben Jonson only because I spent the day working on The Alchemist. We started rehearsals for that today. But this play is full of heart and joy and love of theater, and so is that one in a different way.
On that note, thank you again, all of you, so much for tuning in to this remarkable podversation. Raphael and Jesse, thank you for joining me this evening. We end fittingly with the final words of the play. So on your patience, evermore attending, new joy wait on you. Here our play has ended. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Raphael.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Red Bull Theater Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your support helps us to bring you more captivating conversations and insights into the world of classic theater. To stay updated on our latest activities, follow us on social media, get on our mailing list, and visit www.redbulltheater.com, where you'll find an abundance of podcasts, readings, classes, seminars, productions, and more. Your support makes all of this possible, so please consider making a tax-deductible donation on our website to help us continue bringing classical theater to contemporary audiences. Until next time, thanks, and ever thanks.